So I'd like to welcome you to our webinar. This is Empty Your Inbox, How to Control Your Email, Not to Let It Control You. This is part of our productivity course, and I want to thank you for viewing this presentation. I think you're going to find it really helpful, especially if you've got a ton of email. And let's get right into it. That's typically the problem. We have too much email and not enough time. Or, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. I hope no one has an email inbox like this with 99,999 emails. That looks like it's maxed out. Or something like this in Gmail. Whatever inbox you're using, we're going to go over a number of email management principles in this webinar. And I want you to think about this. Most of us, we were never really taught how do we manage our email because we didn't grow up with that in the school system. So usually it's just kind of thrust upon us and we've got to deal with it. So I want to go over we're going to cover 20 plus tips in this webinar to help you focus and reply to your email faster, making sure it doesn't consume your life. So I want to start with tip number one. And tip number one is simply focus on the task at hand. What I mean by that is you're not trying to multitask while you're checking your email. So some people, they're not trying to multitask, but they are. They've got their email open in one tab. They've got a news site open in another tab. They've got some work they're working on in another tab, and maybe even Facebook in another tab. This is multitask. One thing should be done at a time, and that increases your productivity tremendously. Now, if you don't care about productivity, well, then it's okay to have 4 or 5 or 10 tabs open at a time. But if you're really trying to get things done, it's important to focus on the task at hand. And the same goes when you're dealing with your email. When you are dealing with your email and you're trying to reply to people, clear out your inbox. You're not trying to read articles. You're not trying to have an instant message conversation with your friends or your coworkers, for that matter. You're trying to just get through your email, reply to them, clear out the inbox. So that's tip number one. We want to make sure that we're not multitasking. Tip number two is to turn off email notifications. Now, email notifications come in all shapes and sizes. So, for example, this one over here, this is something you might see on an iPhone or an iPad. This is something you might see on an Android device. Although I think that's a little dated in terms of how Android looks now. This is Outlook. And of course, if anyone's still got AOL, you may have seen something like this, the whole You've Got Mail thing. And by the way, AOL, if you've got an AOL address, I hate to say it, but it's time to upgrade to maybe Gmail or a more modern inbox. Anyway, I'm not going to try to beat up on the AOL users here. Let's move on to tip number 3. I like to start with the easiest first, and to me, this is like getting some quick wins. Anything that takes less than 1 minute, I want to reply to right away. And usually, the first thing that I'm doing before I'm replying to emails is I'm archiving or deleting notification/reference emails. What I mean by that, think of all the promotional emails you get on a daily basis. You might get a number of them. Some of them you might even consider spam. And those notification emails might be, hey, just an FYI, and someone tells you a little message. It doesn't require any kind of reply. It's just a notification email. Now, there might be some newsletters or some promotional emails that you get that you want to continue getting. For example, I get certain kinds of emails where they contain promotions, and every so often I want to be notified of those, so I let them go into my inbox. But usually it's a matter of me looking at the subject line, and I know right away if I'm interested in that promotion or if I'm not interested. But if I am trying to focus on the task at hand, and by that I mean replying to time-sensitive emails, archiving the ones that aren't important, and just overall clearing out that inbox, I want to start with the easiest ones first. That helps me get some momentum, and it kind of builds up a kind of like a snowball effect. Now, tip number 4 is stop sending so much email. If you ever hear this phrase, give and you shall receive, well, the same thing goes with email. The more you send, the more you're going to get. And I want you to be picky about when you send emails. Don't just send an email. Like if somebody sends you an email that says, just an FYI, and they give you for your information, and they give you some detail. You don't have to respond and say, okay, or thanks, unless it's really important that you acknowledge that you received the information. Make sure you don't send pointless emails. That's the tip here, really. Now, a lot of this is kind of centered around work-related email. I know with personal email, when I'm doing my personal email, I break some of these rules because, you know what, it's personal email. You know, someone sends me, you know, a funny email, or they might, you know, some of this stuff is, remember those chain letters? You ever used to get those? I think Facebook kind of broke the back of chain mail, and I used to hate getting those because I had a friend that would just send me way too many of them, and I would just kind of filter those off. But you want to basically make sure that you're not sending unnecessary email. And also keep in mind, when you are sending email, you're not writing, you know, don't think of it as, you're not writing literature. You want to keep it concise. And if you can keep it concise, it saves everyone time. Mark Twain has this really great quote where he says, "I couldn't think of what to write you, so I wrote you a long letter." And I want you to think about that. When people don't know what to write, sometimes when they don't have a clear idea of what they want to ask you or what they want to tell you, sometimes they just kind of go on and on and on. Okay, so for example, if I spent way too much on this time on this slide, then I'm just going on. I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's time to move on to tip number 5, which is don't get addicted to email. It's very easy to get addicted to email because there is actually a psychological satisfaction that comes with checking your email. And getting a message kind of gives you a sense of importance. Remember when we first got our email accounts, maybe you had an AOL account, and when you heard that you've got mail, it was exciting because you weren't getting emails anymore. Now we get way too many emails, and it's not exciting anymore. But we still get a little bit of satisfaction psychologically from seeing an email that comes to us, and sometimes just replying to it. And some people get so addicted to email that they're just constantly checking it all day, and that's another problem. So you want to be able to manage your email and control it. You don't want it to control you. Now, some of you, I'm going to be talking about all these tips, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I've got over 100 different emails in my inbox, or maybe you have over 1,000, or I hope it isn't 10,000. What do we do if we've got just tons of emails in our inbox? Well, this is tip number 6. I want you to create a Backburner folder. And I put folder/label because I know a lot of you might be Gmail users. Gmail is probably the most popular email program out there right now. It's really, really great. Now, if you're in a work environment, I think one of the more popular work-related email programs is Microsoft Outlook. So either way, you can create a folder or a label if you're using Gmail, and you call it Backburner. Now, what is the Backburner folder for? This is where you're going to put all that email, those 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 messages that are in your inbox, you're going to dump them in the Backburner folder. That means that you're putting it on the back burner. And actually, you don't have to put all of them in there. What I would recommend is if you've got 10,000, take everything except for the last 30 days. Why? When you have 10,000 emails in your inbox, looking at that inbox, it's almost like a weight on your shoulder. Think about it psychologically. Some people are afraid to check their email because, you know, when they see so many messages, it's just a burden on their shoulders. And think about the psychological benefit you can get from just taking all those old emails and moving them into a Backburner folder. Now, some people, why don't they want to do this? Some people don't want to delete the emails because they're like, well, you know, I got to eventually get to these, 84 emails. But if you haven't gotten to that email, let's say you've got 1,000 emails. If you haven't gotten to that email in 4 months, chances are you probably won't get to it today. Or chances are it's already been taken care of. Or chances it could be a promotional email you need to delete. And there's this huge burden of just having way too many emails in the inbox. I want you to focus on getting your inbox to 0 every single day. And we're going to talk about some more tips that's going to allow us to create that inbox 0 effect. What's tip number 7? Well, we got to be honest with ourselves. As I mentioned before, if you are not going to answer that email, just delete it or archive it. If you use Gmail, you know that the archive functionality means that you can search for it later. And Google has a really great search algorithm that allows you to search for emails very quickly. Even if you just know a word or two or who sent it to you or the subject line, you can search for any of those things in one search box and find that old email. So again, be honest with yourself and make sure that you are not, if you have no intentions of replying to the email, it needs to get out of your inbox. And we'll talk about some places that we can put it. And again, the Backburner folder that we talked about here, this is just one starting point. I want you to, again, for those of you that have a ton of emails in your inbox, this is one of the things I want you to do today or the next time you step into work. Create that Backburner folder And all you're doing is just moving email from one folder to another. And it's kind of to avoid that anxiety of, oh my God, I'm so behind in my email. And then you could start developing a habit of clearing out your inbox on a daily basis. So let's go to tip number 8, and that is don't mindlessly check your email. This turns you into an email zombie. What I mean by that is some people bookmark their email and they just check it, maybe 10, 20, 30 or more times a day. And it doesn't make any sense to constantly be checking your email. But some people do it because remember what we talked about earlier, that psychological satisfaction of, oh, I got a message. Let me reply to the message. It gives us a sense of self-importance, even though we're not consciously thinking about it. That's what's going on in our brain. So what happens is we get into this habit and we get addicted to email. We become email zombies and we're checking them constantly. So try to make sure that you're not doing that. Now, checking email too often can really make you procrastinate on important projects or important tasks. And this is the other reason why you don't want to be turned into an email zombie, is because it does sometimes serve as a form of procrastination. I mean, we got to be honest with ourselves. I can be honest with myself. This used to be a way for me to put off dealing with really important tasks that I didn't want to get done, that were really, really tough, that required a lot of mental resources. And I didn't want to do them because it was easier to check email. And sometimes I was just checking email and I was just almost like staring at the screen waiting for a new email to come in. And if an email wasn't there, what would I do? I might, maybe you go to a news website and read some news and then come back to check any emails. And all the while I'm just procrastinating on the most important things that I need to get done. So don't let checking your email lead to procrastination or serve as a form of procrastination. Actually, it's almost like one of those things that people will lie to ourselves and say, oh, I'm getting work done because I'm in my email inbox. Just because you're staring at your email or, mindlessly checking it doesn't mean that you're actually getting important work done. So keep that in mind. Now, tip number 10 is setting a limit on how much time you spend in your inbox. So I try to make sure at any given point I'm not spending more than 10 minutes a day in my email. That's my personal example. Now, for some people, it might be 15 minutes or 20 minutes. It depends on how much email you get. But everybody can set some kind of a deadline. I'm confident that you can. Think about how much time you spend. Actually, you might want to start tracking your time from now on. See how much time you spend in your inbox. And then see if you could cut that time down. I guarantee you probably can. You could probably cut it in half. Now, this is one way to do it, set a time limit. But another way that you can do this is also to set a designated time when you check your emails. So here are some examples. You might say that, I'm going to check my email right now. Let's say you're checking your email 10 times a day. And you know what? I wouldn't, for the average worker in the U.S., I wouldn't say that's an uncommon number. Checking email on the phone, checking email multiple times a day. So let's say we change it from 10 times a day to 3 times a day. So let's say you check your email at 10 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then 4 o'clock in the late afternoon right before you leave work. So 10, 1, and 4 p.m. Now that's every 3 hours. Now some people, they can't even imagine doing this. They're like, oh my gosh, well what if a really important email comes in that I really need to reply to as soon as possible? Keep in mind, the very nature of email is that it's a passive form of communication. If somebody really needs to get in touch with you and needs an answer ASAP, don't you think they might call? Or don't you think if they're in their office, they might just walk over to your desk and, tap you on your shoulder and, ask you that question? If not, they probably should. So make sure that you don't get caught up, and try to set aside designated times for checking your email. And you know what? If you let people know these are the times that you check your email, they'll adjust to your schedule. You don't have to adjust to theirs. Now, 10, 1, and 4 p.m., that's one way to kind of, keep yourself from checking it 10 plus times a day. But what I recommend to most people is you eventually want to get to the point where maybe you're just checking it, once or twice a day. So you might check it at 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. So at the beginning of your day and towards the end of your day, if you're working a typical 9 to 5 job. Now, here's a personal example that works really well for me, and it might work well for you. I like to check my email after I complete my 3 most important tasks of the day. So I want you to make sure that going forward, the first thing you do when you come into work is not checking your email. That's probably one of the worst things you can do is check your email the first thing you get in when you get to work. So think about the things that you need to work on that are not email related. They might be computer or internet related, but they're not email related. And these are 3 tasks. So what I do is actually I have 1 to 3 tasks. And I think of these things as I call it MIT. MIT stands for most important tasks. And at most there should be 3, and at the very least there should be 1. So it's a certain kind of a project or 3 different tasks that I need to work on. And the reward, if you want to think of it that way, of finishing those 3 tasks is that you get to check your email. But you cannot check your email until you finish those 3 tasks. Now, however long it takes me. Sometimes I finish those 3 tasks by 10 a.m. Sometimes I finish them by 11. And you know what? There have been times where I finish those 3 tasks. They take a little longer. They're my most important, and I don't get done with them until 12 or 1 or 2. There was this one project that I was working on a few weeks ago, and it was part of my most important task of the day. And I tell myself I can't check my email until I finish the task. This task was so important, I didn't get around, and it took me a while. I didn't get around to checking my email until 3 p.m. Imagine that. Now, for some people, they can't imagine that because they check their email constantly throughout the day. And I can't tell you, that day I didn't check my email until 3 p.m. was one of the most productive days I ever had in my life. Why? Because I didn't focus on my email. I just focused on getting one thing, one singular focus. And, a lot of times we think that if we focus on a lot of different things, we'll get a lot of different things done. But you might not get anything important done. You might have a day where you were really busy, but at the end of the day, you felt like I didn't get anything accomplished. So there's a difference between being busy and getting things done. Keep that in mind. Now, another tip for email management is to, remember how we talked about folders or labels in Gmail? Well, what I like to do is have a reply by a certain day folder. So this is actually just a screenshot from inside my Gmail account. Over on the left-hand side, they show like the labels that you have. And what I have is, you see a reply by, and then I have 1 Monday, 2 Tuesday, 3 Wednesday, and so on all the way to Sunday. So what I do, there are certain emails that I can't reply to right away. I just can't. I don't have the time for them, or maybe I'm waiting on something. So what I do is I just label those emails as reply by, and let's say it's Monday when I got the email. I might say, you know what, I got to reply to this by tomorrow. So I'll label it as Tuesday. And then on Tuesday, I make sure that I check all of my Tuesday messages. And of course, on Wednesday, I make sure I check all my Wednesday messages. And I make sure that I reply to them. Or sometimes I gotta push it to the next day. So no problem. I'll just change the label from Wednesday to Thursday, if that was the case. But having a reply by day folder will help you kind of manage, because we all know that there are some emails that stay in our inbox because we have to put them off because maybe you can't reply to them right now because you're waiting on something. So this is one way to manage it. This is how I manage it, and it's been working very well for me, and I recommend you try it out if you haven't. Tip number 13. Realize that you really don't need to reply to every single email. Okay? Sometimes if you're someone that gets tons and tons of email, you don't want it to consume your life. Chances are your occupation is not, email checker. Your occupation is something else, and email just happens to be part of your work. So keep it as part of your work, not your main source of work. So when you have emails coming in, we all know that not every email needs to be replied to, but sometimes there are emails that come in and we just can't, we just can't deal with it right now. We don't need to reply. And you know what? If it's important enough, sometimes it'll just make its way around to you again, or the person will ask you in person, or they'll give you a call. So, nothing's wrong. Certain things, and by the way, with the disclaimer of, you don't want to be ignoring every email, obviously, because that could lead you to getting fired or being very unproductive. But there are some emails that you should be saying no to. Not everything is worth your time. Tip number 14, create a template/canned response. So this is for if you get emails where you're constantly writing the same kind of reply over and over again, even if it's just a few sentences long, might be a good idea to turn that email into a template. Now, there's a few ways you could do this. You could save it to your computer. You could save it online. And actually, if you use Gmail, there's something called canned responses. So let me show you how you can utilize canned responses and how to get it if you're using Gmail. So I'm going to show you my email account. And actually, for the purposes of this webinar, I made sure that I did not answer any emails all day. So I actually have an email inbox that has not been answered at all. So let's take a look at my email inbox, and I'm going to show you how to use canned responses because that was the title of this slide right here. Okay? So canned responses will help us cut down on the time that we spend on repetitive emails. Okay, so here's my email inbox. You can see I have 25 emails that have kind of built up over the day. And if you look at when these emails started coming in, it started all at 5:33 a.m. And then it went all the way, 25 emails during the day. Now, some of you might be looking, you know what, that's nothing. I get 100 emails a day. I don't know if that's something to brag about, but if you get 100 emails a day, good luck with that. I used to get over 100 emails a day, but some of the tips that I'm going to be talking about in this webinar have led me to getting less email per day, such as unsubscribing to things that I don't need to subscribe to. So let me show you how to use canned responses, and then I'm going to show you how I clear through these emails, because the whole purpose of when I was coming up with this webinar, I wanted to make sure that, you know what, I actually show people at the end of this webinar how I'm going to clear through this inbox very, very quickly. So let me show you the settings area. How do we enable canned messages or templates? We go to settings, which is right here, and settings. We get to this page right here. And if you go right here to Google Labs, this labs area, you'll see it's one of the first things. It's called canned responses. And canned responses, usually it's disabled. You got to enable this. And if it's enabled, what that'll allow you to do, the next time you compose an email, let's say it's a very common email that you always send out. You can just click canned response, and you might, let's say, here's how you do it. You say, okay, this is a template email, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I go to canned response, and then I just say, all right, let's save a new canned response right here. And I'm going to call this the blah, blah email. All right. So I'm going to discard this for now. Go back to compose. Let's say next time I've got to send this message. I click canned response. I insert the blah blah email right there, and there we go. You see it showed up right over here. So I don't have to retype that all over again. Now, I wouldn't recommend, for a one-line thing, you don't need to create a canned response for that or a template. But if you have emails that are a few sentences or a few paragraphs long, it might save you a ton of time to do this. So I want you to be aware of that option within Gmail. So let's move on and continue on with our tips. We're on tip number 15, and this is getting your reading list out of your inbox. So what I mean by that is some people, they will subscribe to different newsletters where articles are delivered to their inbox. And what happens is, remember how we said we want to focus on one task at hand? If you have reading being sent into your email inbox, then that doesn't help you focus on replying to emails. That distracts you and says, hey, read this article, check out this article, check out that article. So I recommend you use Google Reader to utilize RSS feeds. If you're not familiar with these, I'm going to show you in a moment. And use the Read It Later app, which is called Pocket. You can get it at getpocket.com. Let me show you really quickly how I use these. So if you happen to have, here's what Google Reader does. When you see an RSS icon, the next time you see it, and you know what RSS icons look like, you've probably seen this on the internet before. And if you've seen this, the next time you see it, you click on it if it's a website that you visit often. And it'll ask you, do you want to subscribe to this RSS feed? And then you can subscribe through Google Reader. So here's Google Reader's. Let me take you to my Google Reader account really quickly. So when I log into my Google Reader account, here's what it looks like right now. You can see there's 12 new items. That means there's 12 new items from websites that I subscribe to. Now, when I'm subscribing, I'm clicking on that orange RSS icon, but I am not actually giving anyone my email. I'm simply telling Google Reader to keep track of the website for me. Now, there's another way you could subscribe to a website or have Google keep track of it, is just click the subscribe button here. And let's say it's the Wall Street Journal that you want to keep track of. You just type in the website address, www.wsj.com, and it will then keep track of it for you. And it'll show you the most recent article at the top. So you can actually organize this is like your reading center. It's like your personalized magazine in a way. And you can see I actually have subscriptions. I have a productivity folder where I have a bunch of different productivity websites that I keep track of. And if I want to read my productivity news, I just simply click on that. I can read all my news right in here. I click on this, or I click on, what else? Maybe this. Videos will show up, as you can see. And this is a really good way to keep track of things, and you can organize it. Productivity, I've got another folder here called Chicago that keeps track of local news. I have another folder called Education that keeps track of education-related news. And this is keeping track of 20 different websites that are involved with education. So I don't have to visit all those websites or subscribe to all of their email newsletters. Why would I want to give my email out to 20 different websites? And actually, my RSS, my Google Reader account is probably keeping track of 100 different websites. Now, that might seem like overload, but it's a lot easier for me to manage all of that information in one place. All I got to do is go to Google Reader, which is google.com/reader, and that's where I can do my reading. Now, most of the time, I'm just kind of scanning the headlines here, and it helps if you're a trained speed reader. If you haven't taken one of our speed reading classes, you might want to look into it. But let's talk about when I want to read the articles. I mentioned another application on this slide called Pocket. Here's how Pocket works. You install, it's free to use, you install their website add-on. Website add-on. Their browser add-on. It works with all the major browsers. I'm using Google Chrome right now, but you might be using Firefox or Safari or Internet Explorer. And when you install their add-on for the browser, what it will do, you see this little icon that shows up here, or the icon right up here? This is to save a page to read later on. So let's say I want to read this article later on, and I'm on the actual site. What I can do is either click right here, and it'll save it to my Pocket account, or when I'm inside of my RSS reader, if I'm under the productivity folder and I see an article here that's really interesting that I really want to read, I can say, all right, let me read this, and I just click right there. And you see how it says page saved. And I could do this with a number of articles. I might say, I want to read this, and this seems interesting, and maybe I want to read this as well. Well, all these that I save for later, the way I get it is I go back to my Pocket account, which is at getpocket.com, or if you have the browser plugin, you just click on this, and it takes you there. And that's just getpocket.com. Oh, look at that. All my articles are nice and easy right over here. And this is a great way to manage your reading. Now, what is not a good way to manage your reading? Managing your reading inside of your email inbox is not a good idea. Because, again, we're not focusing on one thing at a time. We're trying to focus on replying to emails and clearing out the inbox. We're not trying to do some reading at the same time. And if you do try to do some reading, what's going to happen? You're going to get distracted by it. You might read the article, and then you read another article at the bottom that says, people that read this article also read these articles. And it's very easy to end up getting distracted from, wasn't I working on responding to email? Or someone starts, asking you, hey, did you get my email? So keep your reading list out of your inbox. That's my main point here. Tip number 16. Use folders or labels to categorize action versus reference, okay? Remember I showed you earlier how you can have a reply by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I also have one other label that's called fast action. So fast action is where I put emails that are basically, I can reply to this email in under 5 minutes, but I can't reply to it maybe right now because I'm organizing my inbox. And by organizing my inbox, I mean archiving things, putting them in the reference category, or the reference folder, reference category, reference label, however your email program works. For me, because I use Gmail, even for my work email, I use Gmail. And it's not an @Gmail account. I use Google Apps, so it's @irisreading.com. But I will use a label called reference for emails that don't require responses, but I do want to keep them for reference. Now, I know I could archive and still search for them, but I have the reference folder for reference emails. And I'm going to show you in a moment how I utilize all these things. But another tip that you can use, and this is tip number 17, is to use your filters. Filters help you sort email automatically. So Gmail has a way to do this. Outlook has a way to do this. All modern email programs have a way, and they usually call it a filter, that you can use. Now, remember I told you I used to get emails from a friend that were, these chain letters, and they would send me 3 or 4 a day. something they thought that was funny, and it was just becoming too much. So what I did was I set up a filter. Any emails that were coming from this person that had the letters FWD, which stands for forward, in the subject line, I wanted it filtered and just archived. So I didn't want to even see it in my inbox. So that was a nice way without, I didn't want to offend my friend and say, you know what, I'm getting annoyed by your emails. Can you please stop sending them? I wanted to still have good relations with this person, so I just filter the emails. And then no harm done. It makes a nice and easy situation painless. Tip number 18, use the 1-minute rule. Here's what the 1-minute rule is. If you have an email in your inbox that can be replied to in less than a minute, don't just check it and get to it later. Do it right away. If it takes less than 1 minute, reply as soon as you possibly can. Tip number 19, get less email by unsubscribing. Remember earlier, I showed you in my inbox. I had 25 emails. Actually, we just got one in right now, so 26. 26 emails in one day. This is since the morning. Well, again, some people think that's not a lot of emails, and they feel like they're getting more emails and maybe this webinar doesn't apply to them. No, this webinar does apply because you can start unsubscribing. You can start cutting down on how much email that you have. The reason why I have 25 emails in one day, and again, this is me letting my email, I purposely let my email box, stack up throughout the day so I could show you during the webinar. And I'm actually going to show you in a moment how I clear it out very quickly. But I've done this by unsubscribing to emails. I've done this by delegating. If you have an assistant, maybe you want them to be answering certain kinds of emails and helping you to manage your inbox. Or maybe you want to let people deal with other people. If that's the case, delegation is if you can delegate, it's a good idea to do it. So, but as far as subscribing to things, we've all subscribed to messages that we wanted to receive at one time and then we didn't want to receive them anymore. And most messages should have an opt-out button if they're promotional. If not, you can hit the spam button or you can filter them. So try to cut down on how much email you're getting to begin with. Tip number 20. This is an interesting one that I want you to try out. This is setting an email day, okay? And an organize email day or an ignore email day. Okay, here's what I mean by setting an email day. It's one of these two. So it's either going to be a day where if you feel like right now you've just got tons of email and you really need to organize it, it's a good idea to set a day or maybe a half a day or a few hours in a day to say, you know what, I'm finally going to get a hold of my inbox. And let me set up the labels or folders, let me organize this, reply to some of these old emails, and get that done. Now, there's another way to set an email day, and that is what I call an ignore email day. I've actually heard of some innovative tech companies that started doing this with their workforce, where they told their employees on Fridays, no email. So you know how we have like casual Fridays or Hawaiian shirt Fridays? There are some companies now that are doing no email Friday. What does that mean? Nobody can check their email. Well, what a concept, right? And now this might not work for like the customer support department, but for other departments it might. And what's wrong with having a day where, you know what, I'm just going to talk to people in person. Maybe, get in touch with people, by phone. Have a few meetings, although meetings can be dangerous. Meetings can also be unproductive. We've all had unproductive meetings, I'm sure. But ignoring email, nothing's wrong with it. We used to get around without email just fine, right? Now we can't imagine it. So try to set a day like this. Also, tip number 21 is to use a service to remind yourself. So sometimes you have an email and you're like, you know what? Remember how I showed you those reply by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or let me go back to that. Reply by. What if you don't have to reply by next Monday, but what if you have to reply 3 weeks from now? Then you should use a service like followup.cc. There's another one called Boomerang. And what they do is they provide an easy way for you to remind yourself to either follow up with the email, or maybe you sent someone an email and if they don't get back to you by a certain date, you want the service to remind you. Followup.cc does a really great job of doing this. Makes it very simple. And also Boomerang is another one. So those are two that I highly recommend. Check those out after the webinar. Wouldn't recommend you check them out right now because that would be multitasking and I wouldn't have your full attention. So if you've been taking this productivity webinar, you know the dangers of multitasking. So let's continue on. We're almost done here. Tip number 22, learn the keyboard shortcuts. If you're already a fast typer, more power to you. If you're not, you might want to work on, learning some keyboarding skills and improving your, typing speed. But what you can do, the keyboard shortcuts are available in every single email program. A lot of you are Gmail users. Gmail has a way to enable keyboard shortcuts. You simply go into your inbox under Settings, and then you go into, let's see, you see right here, Keyboard Shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts are on. By default, they turn them off, but if they're on, it will allow you to move through your inbox very easily. So let me give you an example. When I'm going through my email, I can easily go up and down the email. So notice this little cursor on the side right here. I'm going to move it without moving my mouse. So when I press the letter J, it goes down one. When I press J again, it goes down again. You see that moving down the screen? If I press K, it moves up the screen. Now, where do you get all these? Just search for Gmail keyboard shortcuts. Just do a Google search for it, and Google will have, there you go. There's all the keyboard shortcuts. Again, just do a Google search for Gmail keyboard shortcuts, and you'll get this. The letter C allows you to compose an email. This allows you to search. K, move to a new conversation. J, move to an older. N is a new message. P is the previous message. E is to archive. So all of these, there's only a few that I really use, but you can learn these and it'll help you move through your email a lot faster. So that's how we should do that if you've got a lot of, it'll help you get through it a lot faster. And if you're a fast typer, this is going to really speed up your ability to get through email quickly. Now, I want to do a live demonstration, how I manage my email inbox, and I've purposely let my email inbox kind of stack up throughout the day. And it was because I wanted to show during this webinar, and if you're listening to this webinar live, we started here at 6 p.m. Central Time. So I want you to know that I've managed to have a very productive day without checking my email pretty much all day. I've just let it stack up, and that's fine. I was working on plenty of other more important projects, and let me show you really quickly. I'm going to guide you through how I move through the email. Let's go over some basic steps first. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to eliminate, you're going to note, because I'm going to start a timer and you're going to see how fast I get through this. I'm going to start off by eliminating and archiving pointless emails, emails that are notifications. Now, I'm going to read those notifications and I'll get those notifications, but that's pretty much it. Now, also, I'm going to organize my email. Remember I told you I had a fast action label? There it is right there. I have a reference label. There it is right there if I want to reference anything. I have a reply by label. So if there's certain days I want to reply to the email by. So anything in the fast action label is something that will take less than 5 minutes. Now, for the purpose of this webinar and the purpose of the privacy of people that have their email in my inbox, I'm not going to actually open up the emails. But you see how I can get an idea of what the email is saying right here? This is another email tip, anticipation. What does this say? This is obviously a promotional email you see right here, right? This one right here, I know this is somewhat promotional. This is an actual email to me, but it just says, thanks, Paul. So I'm going to be able to move through this pretty quickly. And just to show you, I say we start timing this. So I'm going to click on a little timer here. We're going to start the timer. And by the way, if you're wondering what kind of timer this is online-stopwatch.com if you need an online timer. So here we go. I'm going to start the timer, and I'm going to move through the inbox, and you're going to notice I'm going to be using keyboard shortcuts to move through it quickly, and I'll try to talk you through it really quickly. Here we go. So I've started the timer, and let's just get rid of the emails that are not necessary so far. So a lot of these are notification emails, promotional emails. Okay, I'm just selecting all the emails first. A lot of these are order confirmations. Okay, I remember making those orders. Chicago Ideas Week is coming up next week. I'm looking forward to that. All right, look at that. Most of this stuff is just, boom, archive. Look at that. We're down to 3 emails. Oh, this one's an archive too. This one right here, wanted to touch base and say thank you. Okay, this is someone that took my workshop. I do have to follow up with them, but that's going to be a fast email. I'm going to label this as fast action, archive that. It's in the fast action label. This one right here, okay, that's a meeting that I'm going to have at 3 p.m. next Tuesday. I can add that to my, I just got to confirm with him. I can add that to my calendar. Done. Inbox 0 at less than a minute. How do you like them apples? Now, I'm not saying this to brag, but I want to show you. This is a quick way. Now, most of the emails I had there didn't require much of a response. If they required a response, I would try to get through it in less than, if it was less than a minute, I would probably do it right on the spot. Some of those emails, I'm not going to open them up in the webinar because I don't want to show other people's emails in my webinar. But this is a very, very quick way. If you know the keyboard shortcuts and you start with archiving the notifications and the pointless promotional emails first, that clears away a lot of the junk. And one of the ways that you can get through things faster is when you clear away the clutter and eliminate the clutter. So in conclusion to this webinar, I want to let you know that you want to control your email. You don't want it controlling you. You want to make sure that you're checking it, not 10 times a day or 20 times a day. You want to make sure that you've got certain time frames that you check your email. You don't become an email zombie. And maybe you're checking it twice a day or 3 times a day. I wouldn't recommend checking your email more than 3 times a day unless that's your job to manage email and reply ASAP. But for most of us, that's not the case. Also, make sure that you're setting aside your most important tasks of the day and doing that maybe before you check your email. That might help you be a lot more productive. So with that, I want to thank you for coming out to the webinar. I hope you found this very, very helpful. My contact information is on the screen right there. Katya's contact information is on the screen as well. She was unable to join us for this webinar, but she joined us in the past. That's why it's over there. But if you want to get in touch with me, my contact information is there. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, or by email. And I hope you found this webinar to be helpful. Email is something that I feel a lot of people are really overwhelmed with. And if you keep in mind, we also do these webinars on the corporate level and also for schools. So if you want to invite us to your company or your school, we'd be happy to do this kind of email program or another webinar with a live presentation on productivity or speed reading or memory. So feel free to get in touch with me or our support team. And thank you again for supporting this program. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in a future webinar. Have a really productive day.